What if the men offering to make you rich were the same bloodline that made sure your family stayed poor? Picture this: a polished conference room, expensive suits, champagne glasses catching the light, and across that mahogany table sits a man whose smile could sell you your own death certificate. His name? Richard Harrington III. Old money, generational wealth, the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice because the system already speaks for it. And the man shaking his hand, Malik Carter, self-made tech entrepreneur, first-generation wealth, a man who built empires from broken computers and borrowed dreams. But here's what Malik doesn't know yet. Here's the secret buried 50 years deep in blood-soaked soil. The hand he's shaking, it's the same hand that burned his grandfather's house to the ground. The same bloodline that stole everything his family ever had. The same dynasty that made sure the Carters would never rise again. This is the story of Malik Carter, the man who discovered that his greatest enemy had been hunting him his entire life. The man who turned the table so completely, so devastatingly, that he didn't just reclaim what was stolen. He bought their entire world. Every brick, every deed, every last piece of the empire they built on stolen Black land. This is Black Stories Journal. If you believe that stolen history should never stay buried, that the debts of the past must be paid in full, then you need to subscribe right now. Because the stories we tell here, they're the ones that power refuses to let you hear. And Malik's story, it's about to shake you to your core. Because Malik Carter didn't just reclaim land. He didn't just win a legal battle or settle an old score. No. Malik brought an entire town to its knees. He dismantled a century of stolen wealth, piece by careful piece. And he did it all without lifting a weapon. Just signatures. Just truth. Just the long, patient hand of justice finally reaching through time to collect what was owed. So buckle up, because this story has more twists than a mountain road, more betrayals than a Shakespearean tragedy, and an ending so satisfying, so perfectly poetic, that you'll understand why some people say that revenge is a dish best served cold. But this isn't revenge. Not really. This is something far more powerful. This is restoration. Let me take you back. Back to 1973, back to a small southern town where the racial hierarchy wasn't just tradition, it was law, where Black families knew their place, and white families made sure they stayed there. In this town, there lived a man named Samuel Carter. Now, most people knew Samuel as a farmer. Decent land, grew tobacco and soybeans, kept to himself mostly. But that's only what people saw on the surface, because Samuel Carter was dangerous. Not in the way white folks like to pretend Black men were dangerous. No, Samuel was dangerous because he was organized, because he was educated, because he understood that the key to freedom wasn't just civil rights. It was land ownership, economic power, generational wealth that couldn't be taken away by a badge or a ballot box. Samuel ran a secret operation. In the back room of his farmhouse, away from prying eyes, he helped Black families buy land. He taught them how to read contracts, how to navigate the hostile maze of white banking systems, how to protect their deeds and titles from the legal tricks that had robbed so many before them. And at night, Samuel held literacy classes, taught reading and writing to sharecroppers and farmhands who'd been deliberately kept ignorant. Because Samuel knew something the white power structure feared, that educated Black people with land were unstoppable. But there was one family in that town that saw Samuel for exactly what he was: a threat, a dangerous precedent, a crack in the foundation of their entire world. The Harringtons. Let me tell you about the Harringtons. This wasn't just another wealthy white family. This was generational power condensed into one bloodline. At the head of it all sat Richard Harrington Sr., known throughout the county as the Banker King. He controlled the money, which meant he controlled everything. every loan, every mortgage, every business that needed capital to survive. And Richard Harrington Sr. had built his empire on one simple principle. Black people could work the land, but they could never own it. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. So when Samuel Carter started helping Black families actually secure their property, actually build wealth that could pass down to their children, that was an act of war. Now here's where the official story gets fuzzy. Here's where the records go missing and the witnesses suddenly can't remember, but the truth is buried in ash and blood. On the night of August 14, 1973, Samuel Carter's farmhouse burned to the ground. The official report said it was an electrical fire, faulty wiring, tragic accident, case closed. But here's what the official report didn't say. 3 witnesses saw trucks leaving Samuel's property that night. Trucks that belonged to men who worked for the Harringtons. The sheriff who investigated? He was Richard Harrington Sr.'s cousin, the fire marshal who signed off on the electrical fire theory. He'd received a $20,000 loan from Harrington Bank just 2 weeks prior, with suspiciously generous terms. And the deed to Samuel's land? The deed that Samuel kept in a fireproof safe that showed clear and legal ownership going back to his grandfather, who bought it free and clear in 1889? That deed somehow ended up transferred to Harrington Properties, Inc., signed by Samuel Carter himself, notarized and filed. Only problem was, Samuel's signature was forged. You could tell if you knew what to look for. The slant was wrong. The pressure points didn't match. But who was going to challenge it? Who had the resources, the legal power, the sheer audacity to accuse the banker king of fraud? Nobody. That's who. Samuel survived the fire. Barely. His wife died that night. Samuel was pulled from the flames by a neighbor, his body broken, his lungs destroyed by smoke, his world reduced to ash and agony. He lasted 3 weeks in the hospital. 3 weeks of pain and rage and helpless grief. 3 weeks of knowing exactly who done this to him, knowing exactly why, and knowing he was powerless to stop them. But here's the part they tried to erase from history. The part that only came out decades later when a retired deputy finally grew a conscience on his deathbed. Samuel Carter didn't die from his injuries. Not exactly. 2 men came to his hospital room on the night of September 3, 1973. They told the nurse on duty to take a long break. She knew what that meant. She left. Those men made sure Samuel Carter understood that if he ever spoke about what happened, if he ever tried to fight the deed transfer, if he ever breathed a word of truth to anyone who might listen, then his son, Malik's father, would be next. His grandchildren would be next. The Carter name would be erased from existence. Samuel died that night. The hospital called it complications from smoke inhalation. Another tragic footnote to a tragic accident. But the truth, Samuel was beaten, suffocated, murdered in his hospital bed by men who wore suits instead of hoods, but burned with the same hatred. The Harringtons didn't just steal land. They didn't just commit fraud and arson. They erased a leader. They murdered a man who dared to believe that Black families deserved economic freedom. And then they built a mansion on his grave. That mansion still stands today. White columns gleaming in the sun. Manicured lawns rolling down to a private lake. A monument to theft. A temple to murder. A testament to how easily evil can wear the mask of respectability. And for 50 years, the Harringtons lived there in peace, untouchable, untouched by consequence, protected by power and silence, and the complicity of a town that chose comfort over truth. 50 years, they slept soundly, believing they'd gotten away with it. They had no idea that Samuel's grandson was coming, and that he'd learned to play their game better than they ever could. Malik Carter grew up in the shadow of a story he was never fully told. He knew something terrible had happened to his grandfather. He knew his grandmother had died in a fire. He knew that his father never talked about it. that the subject was closed, forbidden, wrapped in a grief so heavy that even mentioning Samuel's name could shut down a conversation like a door slamming. Malik's mother, Sharon, raised him in a small apartment 3 states away from that southern town. She worked 2 jobs, nursing assistant during the day, cleaning offices at night. She made sure Malik had what he needed, but there was something broken in her, some wound that never healed. Sometimes, late at night, Malik would wake up and hear his mother crying in the kitchen. Soft, careful crying, like she was trying not to disturb the universe with her pain. He'd creep to the doorway and watch her sitting there in the dark, holding a photograph of a man he'd never met, his grandfather, Samuel. But when Malik asked questions, Sharon would shut down. "The past is the past, baby," she'd say, her voice tight and sharp. "We survived. That's what matters." Except surviving wasn't thriving. Surviving was treading water in an ocean that wanted you drowned. The Carter family never recovered from what the Harringtons did. Not emotionally, not financially, not spiritually. They were trauma-made flesh, struggling through generations of poverty and silence and swallowed rage. But Malik was different. From the time he was 8 years old, Malik understood something fundamental about the world. Knowledge was power, and power came from understanding systems. He became obsessed with how things worked, not just machines, though he loved machines, but systems, rules, structures. The invisible architecture that determined who got ahead and who got left behind. He started with computers, found a broken desktop in a dumpster behind a school, brought it home in pieces, taught himself from library books how to fix it, got it running, sold it for $50, bought 2 broken computers, fixed those, sold them, bought 4. By the time Malik was 13, he was running a small business refurbishing electronics. By 15, he taught himself to code. By 17, he built his first app, a simple tool that helped low-income families find food banks and social services in their area. Sharon watched her son with a mixture of pride and fear. Pride because he was brilliant, driven, unstoppable. Fear because she knew what happened to Black boys who got too big, too smart, too successful. She'd seen it happen to her father-in-law. She knew how the world worked. But Malik refused to be afraid, refused to make himself small, refused to believe that his ceiling was predetermined by his zip code or his skin color or his last name. He earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech, studied computer science and business, graduated with honors, and then, instead of taking a safe corporate job, instead of playing it small and careful, Malik did something audacious. He started his own company. It was called Clear Path Technologies. The concept was deceptively simple: AI-powered fraud detection for financial institutions. Machine learning algorithms that could spot patterns of predatory lending, discriminatory practices, financial abuse hidden in mountains of transaction data. Malik built it from nothing. Worked out of his apartment, slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen and ambition, and slowly, painfully, brilliantly, he made it work. ClearPath's technology was revolutionary. It could identify redlining in real time. It could spot when banks were systematically denying loans to qualified Black and brown applicants. It could shine light into the darkest corners of financial discrimination. And it started getting attention. First, from small credit unions, then regional banks, then national financial institutions that wanted to clean up their practices, or at least wanted to look like they were cleaning up their practices. By the time Malik was 32, ClearPath Technologies was valued at $75 million. He had 40 employees, 3 major contracts, and interest from venture capital firms that wanted to scale the company nationally. Malik Carter had built an empire from code and determination. He'd become everything his grandfather dreamed of, but never lived to see. A black man with resources, with power, with the ability to change systems instead of just surviving them. But here's the thing Malik didn't know. Here's the truth that hadn't caught up to him yet. His success hadn't happened in a vacuum. His company, ClearPath, with its mission to expose financial discrimination, it had attracted attention from people who had a lot to hide, and people who'd built their fortunes on exactly the kind of predatory practices Malik's technology was designed to expose. And one company in particular had been watching Malik Carter very, very closely. Harrington Capital Group. Based in Atlanta now, but with roots that stretched back to that small southern town, led by Richard Harrington III, grandson of the banker king, heir to an empire built on stolen black land and buried bodies. Richard Harrington III was nothing like his grandfather. He didn't wear his racism on his sleeve. He spoke in measured tones about diversity and inclusion. He donated to the right charities. He attended the right galas. He knew how to perform allyship while practicing annihilation. And he'd identified Malik Carter as both an opportunity and a threat. An opportunity because ClearPath's technology was valuable. Owning it would mean controlling the very tool designed to expose financial discrimination. Talk about irony. A threat because Malik Carter was smart, principled, and dangerous. The kind of black entrepreneur who might actually change things if given the chance. The kind who needed to be controlled, contained, or destroyed. So Richard Harrington III made a decision. He would approach Malik Carter with an offer that looked like a dream come true, but was actually a cage. He would do to Malik exactly what his family had always done to black people who got too powerful. He would smile, shake hands, and rob him blind. But Richard Harrington III had made one critical error, one fatal miscalculation that would cost him everything. He had no idea who Malik Carter really was. No idea whose blood ran through his veins. No idea that the man he was about to manipulate was the grandson of the man his grandfather had murdered. And he definitely had no idea that Malik was about to find out the truth. The meeting happened at Harrington Capital Group's Atlanta office, 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, the kind of view that reminded you who held power and who merely borrowed it. Malik arrived wearing his best suit, which still wasn't quite as expensive as the receptionist's shoes, and carrying a leather portfolio containing ClearPath's pitch deck. He'd been in dozens of investor meetings before, but this one felt different, bigger. The kind of opportunity that could transform his company from successful to dominant. Richard Harrington III greeted him personally. That should have been the first warning sign. Men at that level didn't greet anyone personally unless they wanted something specific. "Malik," Richard said, extending his hand with a smile that looked warm but felt like ice. "I've been following your work for years. ClearPath is exactly the kind of innovative, socially conscious company we love to support." Socially conscious. That phrase dripped from Richard's mouth like honey, laced with poison. They sat in a conference room that probably cost more than Malik's entire apartment. Leather chairs, abstract art on the walls, a table made from a single piece of mahogany that had probably witnessed more dreams dying than being born. Richard's team presented their offer, and on the surface, it looked incredible. $50 million in Series B funding. Immediate access to Harrington Capital's network of financial institutions. Support from their marketing and legal teams. Resources to scale nationally within 18 months. Malik felt his heart race. This was it. This was the moment every entrepreneur dreams of. The moment when struggle transforms into a rival. But then Richard slid the term sheet across that mahogany table, and Malik started reading the fine print. Harrington Capital Group would receive 60% equity in ClearPath Technologies. Not 49%, which was already aggressive. 60, majority control. They would have 3 seats on the 5-person board. Control. All major product decisions would require board approval. Control. Malik's current contracts could be renegotiated or terminated if the board deemed it necessary. Control, and buried in Section 47, subsection C, paragraph 3. Any intellectual property developed during the partnership would become joint property, with Harrington Capital having first rights to licensing and commercialization. Malik read that section 3 times. What it meant, in practical terms, was that Harrington Capital could take ClearPath's fraud detection technology, the technology designed to expose predatory lending, and bury it. License it exclusively to companies that would never actually use it, effectively killing the mission while profiting from the corpse. Malik looked up from the term sheet. Richard was watching him with that same warm smile, but his eyes were cold and calculating. Patient. Like a snake watching a mouse discover it was in a trap. "I know it seems like a lot of control," Richard said smoothly, "but that's standard for this level of investment. We need to protect our capital. I'm sure you understand." Malik did understand. He understood perfectly. This wasn't an investment. This was a takeover disguised as partnership. This was exactly the kind of predatory deal that ClearPath's technology was designed to identify and stop. "I need time to review this with my attorney," Malik said carefully. Richard's smile tightened just a fraction. "Of course, take the weekend, but I should mention we have another company we're considering. Similar space. If you pass, we'll likely move forward with them instead." There it was. The pressure, the artificial deadline, the manufactured competition, all the classic manipulation tactics Malik had studied and taught his clients to recognize. Malik stood, shook hands, and left that 47th floor office with his stomach in knots. He spent the weekend reviewing the contract with his attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia, who'd worked in venture capital before switching to representing founders. She read through the terms with increasing dismay. "Malik," she finally said, looking up from her laptop, "this is the worst term sheet I've seen in 15 years. They're not investing in you, they're buying you. And then they're going to dismantle everything you've built." "That's what I thought," Malik said quietly. "You have to decline." "I know." On Monday morning, Malik called Richard Harrington III and politely declined the offer. He thanked him for his time and said ClearPath would be pursuing other funding options. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Richard spoke, and his voice had lost all its warmth. "I think you're making a mistake, Malik. A serious mistake, but it's your choice to make." The call ended. Malik felt relieved. He dodged a bullet, except it wasn't a bullet. It was the opening salvo of a war he didn't even know he was fighting. Within a week, strange things started happening to ClearPath Technologies. First, a scheduled audit by one of their major clients was suddenly moved up by 2 months, an audit that required weeks of preparation, thrown at them with 48 hours' notice. Then a tech journalist, someone who'd previously written glowing profiles of Malik, published a hit piece questioning ClearPath's actual effectiveness. The article was suspiciously well-researched, citing internal documents the journalist shouldn't have had access to. Then Malik's bank called. There'd been irregularities in ClearPath's account. Nothing serious, but they needed to freeze the account for 10 days while they investigated. 10 days without access to operating capital. Then 2 of Malik's investors received anonymous emails claiming Malik had misrepresented ClearPath's financials. Complete fabrications, but damaging enough to spook them. Then the IRS announced a random audit of ClearPath's tax returns for the previous 3 years. Malik wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what was happening. This was coordinated. This was systematic. This was punishment for refusing to submit. And it was coming from Harrington Capital Group. It had to be. They had the resources, the connections, the motivation. But Malik couldn't prove it. That was the beauty of power operating in the shadows. It left no fingerprints, just consequences. One night, exhausted and frustrated, Malik did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He searched for information about Richard Harrington III online, not just professional information. Personal history, family background, where the Harrington fortune actually came from. He scrolled through articles about Harrington Capital's success, photos of Richard at charity galas, puff pieces about his business acumen and commitment to diversity. And then he found a photo that made his blood freeze. It was a historical feature in Atlanta magazine about prominent Georgia families. A photo spread showing the Harrington family mansion. The historic Harrington estate, the caption read, built in 1974 on prime farmland in Wilcox County. 1974, 1 year after his grandfather's death. Malik's hands started shaking. He zoomed in on the photo, the mansion, the land, the location description. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. It was late, but this couldn't wait. "Mom," he said when she answered. "Where exactly was Grandfather Samuel's farm? What county?" There was a long silence. "Why are you asking me this, Malik? Please, just tell me." Another pause, then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Wilcox County, Georgia? Why?" Malik's vision blurred. His entire body went cold. "Malik? Baby, what's wrong?" He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was understanding. The Harringtons, the family that had just tried to steal his company, the family that was now systematically destroying him for refusing their offer. They were the same family that had stolen his grandfather's land, the same bloodline that had murdered Samuel Carter, the same dynasty that had spent 50 years living on property that was stolen through arson and fraud and violence. And Richard Harrington III, the man who'd smiled at him across that mahogany table, who'd offered him partnership with a snake's grin, was the grandson of his grandfather's killer. "Mom," Malik said, his voice shaking with fury he'd never felt before, "I need you to tell me everything. Everything that happened to Grandfather Samuel. No more protecting me. No more silence. I need to know the truth." And for the first time in his life, Sharon Carter told her son the whole story. The real story. The story of how the Harringtons built their empire on black blood and stolen land. She told him about the fire, the forged deed, the threats, the hospital room visit, the murder disguised as complications. She told him about the sheriff who was bought, the witnesses who were silenced, the legal system that protected white thieves while punishing black victims. She told him how the Harrington family erased Samuel Carter from history and built a mansion on his grave. And when she finished, when the story was finally complete, Malik sat in silence for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "They killed him, and now they want to own me." He stood up, looked out his window at the Atlanta skyline, saw the lights of buildings controlled by people who thought they were untouchable. "No," he said, his voice cold and clear and absolutely certain, "I'll own them." The drive to his mother's house took 4 hours. Malik didn't sleep, didn't eat, just drove through the night with his hands gripping the steering wheel and his mind replaying every interaction with Richard Harrington III, seeing them now through the lens of truth. The smile that wasn't warm, the offer that was poison, the systematic destruction that followed his refusal. This wasn't just business. This was pattern. This was what the Harringtons did to black people who got too powerful, too visible, too successful. They crushed them. They always had. Sharon was waiting when he arrived. She looked older than Malik remembered, as if telling the truth had cost her something precious. She'd made coffee that neither of them would drink. They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Malik had done his homework as a kid, where she'd balanced her checkbook and counted pennies, where the weight of poverty and grief had pressed down on them for decades. "Tell me again," Malik said. "Everything. I need every detail." So Sharon told the story again, slower this time, with details that hurt to speak aloud. She told him about Samuel Carter, not just the man who died, but the man who lived, his brilliance, his courage, his absolute refusal to accept that Black people should remain economically powerless. Your grandfather, Sharon said, her voice thick with memory, he believed that land ownership was freedom, not just for him, but for everyone. He helped at least 30 Black families buy property between 1968 and 1973. 30 families who would have been stuck as sharecroppers or tenant farmers forever. She pulled out a box from under the table. Inside were papers, photographs, documents she'd kept hidden for 50 years. Evidence she'd been too afraid to share, too traumatized to look at. The Harringtons saw him as a threat, she continued, because he was organizing. He wasn't just helping people buy land. He was teaching them to read, to understand contracts, to protect themselves legally. He was building something that could last, generational wealth, generational power. She showed Malik a photograph, Samuel Carter, standing in front of his farmhouse, wearing overalls and a proud smile. A man who looked like Malik, same eyes, same determined set to his jaw. Richard Harrington Sr. hated your grandfather, Sharon said. Hated him with the kind of hatred that rich white men have for Black people who refuse to stay in their place, and so he destroyed him. She laid out the evidence. Sheriff reports with obvious holes in the story, witness statements that contradicted each other, the forged deed transfer with Samuel's signature that didn't match any of his actual signatures. They didn't even try that hard to cover it up, Sharon said bitterly, because they knew no one would challenge them. Who was going to fight the banker king? Who had the resources, the courage, the stupid belief that justice actually existed? She showed Malik a newspaper clipping from September 1973, a small article about Samuel's death. Local farmer dies from injuries sustained in house fire. 3 sentences. That's all his life was worth to the white newspaper. But then Sharon pulled out something else. A letter, yellowed with age, written in shaky handwriting. This, she said quietly, is from the nurse who was on duty the night your grandfather died. She wrote it 20 years later, when she was dying of cancer. She wanted someone to know the truth before she went. Malik read the letter. His hands shook so hard he could barely hold the paper. The nurse described 2 men coming to Samuel's hospital room, how she was told to leave, how she heard sounds through the door, sounds that still haunted her decades later, how she came back to find Samuel dead and the men gone, and the doctor signing off on complications from smoke inhalation. She described the men. One was tall with a scar on his left hand. The other was shorter, with slicked back hair and cold eyes. The shorter one, the nurse had written, wore a ring with the letter H on it. I'll never forget that ring because I saw it when he placed his hand over Mr. Carter's mouth. Sharon was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Your grandfather wasn't killed by fire, Malik. He was murdered, suffocated in his hospital bed by men who worked for Richard Harrington Sr. And then they made sure his family knew. If we ever spoke up, if we ever tried to fight back, they'd kill the rest of us too. Malik felt something break open inside him. Not just anger, though there was anger, volcanic and unstoppable, but also clarity, understanding, the missing piece that explained everything about his life. Why his mother had always been so afraid, why she'd moved them so far away, why she'd worked herself to exhaustion keeping them small, invisible, safe. Why she'd never let him ask questions about his grandfather. She'd been protecting him from the truth, from the rage, from the dangerous knowledge that the Harringtons were still out there, still powerful, still untouchable. They stole everything from us, Malik said quietly. Not just land, not just money. They stole our history, our legacy, our future. Sharon nodded, wiping her eyes. And when I heard you were meeting with Harrington Capital, when you told me their name, I almost told you to run, to refuse whatever they offered. But I didn't want to burden you with this pain. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe they'd forgotten about us. They didn't forget, Malik said. They knew exactly who I was. They've probably known the whole time. And when I refused to submit, when I wouldn't let them take my company, they started destroying me, just like they destroyed grandfather. He looked at his mother, really looked at her, saw the weight she'd carried alone for 50 years, the trauma she'd swallowed to keep him safe, the rage she'd buried so deep it had poisoned her from the inside. "I'm sorry," Sharon whispered. "I should have told you sooner." "I should have—" "No," Malik interrupted gently. "You did what you had to do to keep me alive. But Mom, I'm not a child anymore, and I'm not going to run. I'm not going to hide, and I'm sure as hell not going to let them get away with this. Malik, they'll destroy you. They have too much power, too many connections. They tried to destroy grandfather because he was teaching black families to build wealth. He was fighting with whatever tools he had, literacy classes and land deals and community organizing. But Mom, I have tools he never had. I have technology, resources, knowledge, and most importantly, I have something they don't know about." "What's that?" "Their arrogance. They think I'm just another black entrepreneur they can crush. They have no idea that I know who they really are. They have no idea I have evidence. They have no idea that while they're busy attacking me, I'm about to start attacking back." Sharon grabbed his hand, her grip desperate. "They'll kill you, baby, just like they killed your grandfather." Malik looked at his mother with absolute certainty. "Then I'll make sure the truth comes out before they do. But Mom, they're not going to kill me, because I'm going to dismantle them so completely, so publicly, so devastatingly that murdering me would only prove everything I'm about to expose." He stood up, gathering the documents, the photographs, the nurse's letter. "Evidence, ammunition, truth. What are you going to do?" Sharon asked. Malik's smile was cold, calculated, nothing like the warm kid who used to do homework at this table. "I'm going to study them, learn everything about their business, their properties, their debts, their secrets. I'm going to find every crack in their empire. And then, very carefully, very patiently, I'm going to bring the entire thing crashing down." "How?" "The same way they destroyed us. Legally, financially, quietly. Using the system that protects them to destroy them. I'm going to buy them, Mom. Piece by piece. Asset by asset. Debt by debt. I'm going to own the Harringtons. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly how they built their fortune. On stolen black land. On murder. On 50 years of lies." Sharon was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Your grandfather would be proud." "Grandfather isn't here," Malik said softly, "but I'm going to make sure his story is. No more silence, no more hiding. The Harringtons buried our family's truth. I'm about to dig it back up and shove it down their throats." He kissed his mother's forehead and walked out into the morning light, carrying a box of evidence that would change everything. The war had begun, and Malik Carter was fighting with 50 years of buried rage as his fuel and his grandfather's stolen legacy as his cause. The Harringtons had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn that some debts compound over time. And interest on murder, that's a price that can destroy empires. Malik returned to Atlanta transformed, not visibly. He still looked like the same young tech entrepreneur trying to save his company from coordinated attacks. But inside, he'd become something else entirely. A ghost in the machine. A specter haunting the Harrington Empire's foundation, looking for cracks. He started with research. Obsessive, methodical, relentless research. He created a digital war room in his apartment. 3 monitors. Walls covered with printed documents. string connecting photos and corporations, and shell companies like a detective movie, except this was real and the stakes were someone's entire legacy. Malik studied Richard Harrington III the way a hunter studies prey. Every interview he'd ever given, every business deal Harrington Capital had ever made, every property the family owned, every debt they carried, every partner they'd screwed over, every enemy they'd made. And there were enemies, dozens of them. Because people like the Harringtons didn't build empires through fairness and collaboration. They built them through exploitation and manipulation and leaving casualties in their wake. Malik reached out to these casualties, carefully, anonymously at first, other founders whose companies had been gutted by Harrington Capital, real estate developers who lost properties to suspicious deals, bankers who'd been pushed out after raising concerns about lending practices. He collected their stories, their evidence, their rage. But Malik didn't just research the Harringtons. He researched financial warfare itself, how to fight invisible battles, how to dismantle empires without firing a shot. He studied corporate raiders from the 1980s, activist investors who'd brought down Fortune 500 companies, financial strategists who specialized in hostile takeovers. He read books on leverage, on debt acquisition, on the art of the quiet kill, and slowly, a plan began to form. Not revenge. That was too simple, too emotional. This was something more surgical, more complete. Malik would become invisible. He'd use shell companies and intermediaries to acquire pieces of the Harrington empire without them knowing it was him. He'd buy their debts quietly through third parties. He'd acquire properties adjacent to their holdings. He'd build relationships with their competitors and their creditors. He'd become the ghost in their financial system, the invisible hand slowly closing around their throat. But to do this, Malik needed capital, serious capital, and he needed to move fast before the Harringtons' attacks on ClearPath became fatal. So he made a decision that hurt, but was necessary. He sold ClearPath Technologies to a consortium of impact investors who shared his mission. Not for what it was worth, there wasn't time for that, but for enough to fund what came next, $35 million. Enough to start a war. His employees were devastated. His board was confused. But Malik couldn't explain. Not yet. The Harringtons were watching too closely. With the capital secured, Malik began building his invisible empire. He created a web of shell companies with boring, forgettable names. Midwest Property Holdings, LLC, Southern Capital Partners, Red Clay Investments, each one registered in different states, each one appearing completely unconnected to Malik Carter or to each other. Through these entities, Malik started acquiring pieces of the Harrington world. First, he bought a small debt that Harrington Capital had sold off to a collections agency. Just $40,000. Nothing significant. But it was a debt owed by a property management company that serviced 3 Harrington buildings. Malik didn't collect the debt. He just held it, studied the management company's operations, learned how the Harrington properties actually functioned. Then he acquired a lien on a commercial property 2 blocks from Harrington Capital's Atlanta office. The property was owned by a developer who'd overextended himself. Malik bought the lien for pennies on the dollar. Didn't foreclose, just waited, watched. He purchased shares in a regional bank that held 2 of Harrington Capital's credit lines. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to access shareholder reports and quarterly filings. Piece by piece, brick by brick, Malik built a map of the Harrington empire. Not the public face, anyone could see that. He mapped the foundation, the hidden supports, the load-bearing walls that kept the whole structure standing, and he found weaknesses. So many weaknesses. The Harringtons had overextended themselves. They'd used the 2020 low-interest environment to acquire aggressively, and now with rates rising, they were carrying expensive debt across multiple properties and ventures. They looked solvent on paper, but the margins were thin, dangerous thin. Harrington Capital had invested heavily in commercial real estate just before the work-from-home revolution. Their office buildings were hemorrhaging tenants. They were trying to hide the losses through creative accounting, but the fundamentals were rotting. And then Malik found something interesting, something that made his pulse quicken with possibility. The Harrington family mansion, the one built on Samuel Carter's stolen land, wasn't actually owned by Richard Harrington III personally. It was held by a family trust. And that trust was secured against debts held by Harrington Bank, a small regional institution the family still controlled. If Harrington Bank failed, the trust would be exposed to creditors. And if the trust was exposed, the mansion could be seized to satisfy debts. Malik smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. But he couldn't move yet. He needed more leverage, more information, more power. And that's when Grace entered the picture. Grace Harrington, Richard III's daughter. Malik first noticed her at a charity gala he'd been invited to before everything fell apart. She was impossible to miss. Tall, poised, moving through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone born into wealth. But there was something else in her eyes, something that didn't match the perfect exterior. Malik did his research. Grace Harrington was 28 years old, Yale undergraduate, Harvard Law. She worked at a nonprofit focused on criminal justice reform, which seemed odd for someone from a family that had probably helped write the discriminatory policies that nonprofit was trying to fix. She was estranged from her father, according to social media patterns, rarely appeared in family photos, skipped the big Harrington events. Malika wondered if she knew, if she understood what her family really was. 3 weeks after he started building his invisible empire, Malik received an email from an encrypted address. No name, no signature, just a message. I know what you're planning, and I want to help. But first, you need to know the truth is bigger than you think. Check the deed records for Wilcox County between 1970 and 1975. Not just your grandfather's land, all of it. Gee, Malik's heart raced. This could be a trap. The Harringtons trying to smoke him out, to confirm their suspicions. But something about the email felt genuine, and the suggestion to check deed records was specific enough to be useful. So Malik drove back to Wilcox County, went to the county clerk's office, requested records from 1970 to 1975, and what he found made him physically ill. Samuel Carter's land wasn't the only Black-owned property that had transferred to the Harringtons during those years. There were 17 other parcels, 17 Black families who'd somehow lost their land between 1970 and 1975. All transferred to Harrington Properties, Inc., or associated shell companies. Some were recorded as sales, but the prices were suspiciously low. $500 for 40 acres, $2,000 for entire farm. Prices that suggested coercion or desperation or outright fraud. Others were foreclosures. Black families who'd suddenly defaulted on loans from Harrington Bank, despite years of on-time payments. And 3, including Samuel's, were recorded as transfers due to abandonment of property. The legal equivalent of saying the families just walked away from land they'd owned for generations. Malik photographed every record, every deed, every transfer. The pattern was undeniable. The Harringtons hadn't just stolen from Samuel Carter. They'd systematically stolen from an entire community of Black landowners. 18 families, thousands of acres, millions of dollars in current value. This wasn't just his grandfather's story. This was genocide. Economic genocide carried out with legal documents instead of weapons. Malik sat in his car outside the clerk's office, shaking with rage and grief and terrible, clarifying purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't even about justice for his grandfather. This was about truth, about exposure, about making sure that every single person who'd been erased by the Harringtons was remembered, named, honored. He sent a reply to the encrypted email. I found them. All 18 families. Who are you? The response came 3 hours later. Someone who's ashamed of her last name. We need to meet, but not in Atlanta. They're watching you. Drive to Athens tomorrow. Coffee shop called Jittery Joe's on Clayton Street. 2 p.m. Come alone. I'll find you. Grace. So it was her. Grace Harrington, the daughter, the heir. Malik didn't sleep that night. He played out every scenario. This could still be a trap. She could be working with her father to draw him out, to get him to reveal his plans. But if she was genuine, if she really wanted to help, she could be the key to everything. An insider with access to documents and conversations and family secrets that Malik could never reach on his own. He had to take the risk. The next day, Malik drove to Athens, found the coffee shop, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and waited. She walked in at exactly 2 p.m. Jeans and a simple sweater, no makeup, no jewelry, trying to blend in, to be anyone other than a Harrington. She sat down across from him without asking permission. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but her voice was steady when she spoke. My family destroyed yours, she said quietly, and I only found out 3 months ago. Malik studied her face, looking for deception. He found only guilt and genuine pain. How did you find out? He asked. I was going through my grandfather's papers. Richard Sr. He died last year, and my father asked me to sort through his estate documents. I found records, letters, notes about acquisitions in the 1970s, about problem families that needed to be dealt with. Your grandfather's name was in there, Samuel Carter, listed as a primary threat to regional stability. She pulled out her phone, opened a photo, showed it to Malik. It was a handwritten note on Harrington Bank letterhead, dated August 1973. Samuel Carter must be neutralized immediately. The niggers are organizing. If we don't act now, we'll lose control of Wilcox County entirely. Recommend immediate resolution through established channels. RH. Malik's hands clenched into fists. Seeing the slur written so casually, seeing his grandfather described as a threat to be neutralized, it made everything real in a way the stories hadn't. There were more, Grace continued. Notes about the fire, about hospital arrangements, about deed transfers. My grandfather orchestrated everything, documented it like it was just business. And my father, her voice cracked, my father knows. He's always known. He inherited those documents and kept them, like trophies. Why are you telling me this? Malik asked. Why betray your family? Because they're not my family, Grace said fiercely. A family doesn't build wealth on murder. A family doesn't systematically destroy Black communities and then pretend to be philanthropists. My last name might be Harrington, but I'm not them. I won't be them. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything I found is on here. Letters, deeds, financial records, my grandfather's notes, photos of documents my father thinks are safely locked in his private safe. I copied everything. Malik picked up the flash drive like it was a bomb, which, in a way, it was. If your father finds out, he'll destroy me, Grace finished. I know, but I can't live with this anymore. I can't eat their food and sleep in their houses and benefit from money stolen from murdered families. So I'm giving you what you need to destroy them, and I'm asking you to do it. What do you want in return? Malik asked, suspicious. Nobody gave up this much without wanting something. I want the truth to come out, Grace said simply. I want everyone to know what the Harringtons really are. And I want my father to lose everything, the way your grandfather did, but I need you to promise me something. What? When this is over, when you've taken everything from them, use it for good. Build something that honors the families they destroyed. Don't just win. Transform it. Make sure their evil gets turned into something beautiful. Malik looked at this woman, this Harrington who wasn't really a Harrington, and saw the truth in her eyes. She was genuine. She was an ally. And she just handed him weapons that could end a dynasty. "I promise," he said. Grace nodded, stood to leave. Then she paused. "One more thing. My father's planning something. I don't know exactly what, but he's meeting with lawyers and investors all next week. I think he's trying to consolidate his holdings. Maybe because he suspects someone is buying up his debt. Whatever he's planning, it's happening fast. How fast? Days, maybe a week. If you're going to move, Malik, you need to move now." She left without another word, disappearing into the Athens afternoon like she'd never been there at all. Malik sat alone with the flash drive burning in his pocket. He had evidence. He had an insider. He had a plan. But Grace was right. He needed to move fast. The Harringtons were circling their wagons. The invisible war Malik had been planning was about to become very, very visible, and the battlefield was about to get bloody. Malik spent 3 days analyzing everything on Grace's flash drive, and what he found was so much worse than he'd imagined. The systematic theft from 18 black families was just the beginning. The Harringtons had been running this playbook for decades, long before Samuel Carter, and they'd continued it long after. Richard Harrington Sr.'s notes read like a manual for economic terrorism, detailed strategies for identifying problematic black landowners, meaning successful ones, organized ones, ones who were helping others build wealth. Then, step-by-step instructions for destroying them. Deny them loans and credit. Use Harrington Bank's influence to get other banks to deny them too. Create financial pressure. If they had loans, call them due early using technical violations. Foreclose quickly before they can fight back. If they own property outright, use tax assessments. Have the county assessor dramatically increase their property values, making taxes impossible to pay. Then swoop in when they're forced to sell. If they resist, apply social pressure. Have the sheriff randomly patrol their property. Have building inspectors find violations. Make their lives hell until they give up. And if they still resist, if they're like Samuel, organizing and fighting back, then use extreme measures. The notes didn't specify what that meant, but Malik knew. Fire, violence, murder. This wasn't just theft. This was a systematic campaign to prevent black wealth accumulation. A campaign that had been running for over 50 years, across 2 generations of Harringtons, enriching them while impoverishing entire communities. But the most devastating discovery was the map. Buried in the files was a hand-drawn map of Wilcox County from 1970. It showed every black-owned property, marked with dots. And next to each dot was a notation: acquired 1971, acquired 1973, acquired 1975, 18 properties marked as acquired. But the map showed 43 dots total, meaning there were 25 more black families the Harringtons had targeted. Some they'd stolen from successfully. Others had somehow survived or escaped. Malik cross-referenced the map with current deed records, worked through the night, tracing property ownership through 5 decades of transfers and sales and foreclosures. By morning, he had the full picture, and it was staggering. The Harringtons had successfully stolen land from 32 black families between 1970 and 1985. 32 families, over 15,000 acres, property that was worth, in today's market, over $250 million. The entire Harrington fortune was built on stolen black land. Every dollar, every property, every investment. The roots were poisoned, and they'd gotten away with it because nobody had ever connected the dots. Each theft looked like an isolated incident, a random foreclosure, an unfortunate fire, a family deciding to sell. Only when you saw them all together, mapped out over time, did the pattern become undeniable. Malik sat back from his computer, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he'd discovered. This wasn't just his fight anymore. This was 32 families who deserved justice, descendants who deserved to know the truth, communities that deserved restitution. But then he found something else in the files, something that changed everything. A financial statement from Harrington Bank, dated just 2 months ago, and it was bad. Really bad. The bank was insolvent, hemorrhaging money. They'd made aggressive commercial real estate loans during the pandemic that had gone south. They'd invested heavily in cryptocurrency ventures that had collapsed. They'd extended lines of credit to ventures that defaulted. On paper, Harrington Bank looked stable, but that was creative accounting and shell game tactics. In reality, the bank was days away from failing. If anyone actually examined their books, if regulators came in and demanded transparency, the whole thing would collapse. And if Harrington Bank collapsed, the entire Harrington empire would collapse with it. Because the bank wasn't just one asset, it was the linchpin. The family had used the bank to secure loans for their properties, to back their investment fund, to guarantee their holdings. The bank's failure would trigger a cascade of defaults and margin calls that would destroy everything. Richard Harrington III was sitting on a financial time bomb, and he knew it. That's why he'd been trying to consolidate. That's why he'd attacked Malik's company so aggressively. He needed wins, needed acquisitions, needed some way to inject capital into the bank before the truth came out. Malik leaned back in his chair, mind racing. This was it. This was the opportunity. The bank was the weak point, the crack in the foundation. If Malik could acquire Harrington Bank, or even enough of its debt to force a takeover, he could bring down the entire Harrington empire. Not in years, not in months, in weeks. But there was a problem, a big one. Harrington Bank was privately held, and Richard III owned 70% of the shares. There was no way to buy in directly, unless Malik pulled up the bank's financial structure, studied the debt obligations, the credit lines, the secured loans, and then he saw it. A vulnerability so obvious, he couldn't believe he'd missed it before. Harrington Bank owed $38 million to a consortium of regional lenders. The loan was secured against the bank's commercial property holdings, and that loan was set to come due in 45 days. If the bank couldn't pay, and Malik was certain they couldn't, the lenders could seize the collateral and force a sale of the bank to recover their money. Malik needed to buy that debt, all $38 million of it. Then he'd control the bank's fate, but he didn't have $38 million. He'd spent most of his capital acquiring smaller assets and building his invisible empire. He had maybe $12 million in liquid capital left. He needed partners. He needed investors who shared his vision. He needed people willing to bet big on bringing down a dynasty. Malik made a list of everyone who had reason to hate the Harringtons, every entrepreneur they'd screwed, every community they'd harmed, every investor who'd lost money on their deals. And then he started making calls, careful calls, encrypted communications, meeting in person when possible. He showed them the evidence, showed them the map of stolen land, showed them Richard Harrington Sr.'s notes about neutralizing threats, showed them the bank's real financial situation. And he made his pitch: pool resources to buy the Harrington Bank debt, force a takeover when they can't pay, dismantle the empire, return stolen land to descendants, transform the entire system. Some people said no, too risky, too complicated, too likely to fail, but others said yes. A former Harrington Capital portfolio manager who'd been pushed out for raising ethical concerns. She brought $2 million. A real estate developer who'd lost properties to suspicious Harrington deals. He brought $5 million. A group of impact investors focused on racial justice. They brought $8 million. A credit union that served predominantly Black communities. They brought $4 million. By the end of the week, Malik had assembled a coalition of 11 investors. Total capital, $39 million. Just enough to buy the debt with $1 million left over for legal fees. They moved fast. Used intermediaries and shell companies to approach the lenders holding Harrington Bank's debt. Offered to buy it for 105 cents on the dollar, more than face value, which was unusual but not unheard of when the buyer wanted to avoid the hassle of collection. The lenders were happy to sell. They got a quick, clean exit with a small profit. No idea they just sold the rope that would hang the Harringtons. Within 7 days, Malik and his coalition owned $38 million of Harrington Bank debt, due in 37 days, secured against properties the bank couldn't afford to lose. Richard Harrington III had no idea. He was busy trying to salvage his other holdings, trying to hide the bank's problems, trying to maintain the illusion of success while everything rotted underneath. He had no idea that Malik Carter, the entrepreneur he tried to crush, the grandson of the man his grandfather had murdered, now held his entire empire in his hands. But Malik didn't celebrate, because he knew the next part would be the hardest. The Harringtons wouldn't go down quietly. The moment they realized what was happening, they'd fight back with everything they had. Lawyers, political connections, media manipulation, maybe even violence. Malik thought about his grandfather, about the hospital room, about the men with the ring bearing the letter H, and he made sure he wasn't alone. He moved to a secure location, hired security, kept his coalition informed of every move, made sure that if something happened to him, the truth would still come out, because the truth was the weapon, the truth about 32 stolen properties, about murdered black landowners, about a dynasty built on graves, and in 37 days, that truth was going to bury the Harringtons forever. The countdown had begun. 23 days until Harrington Bank's debt came due. 23 days until Malik could force a reckoning. 23 days to keep everything together. And then it all started falling apart. It began with a phone call at 3 a.m. One of Malik's shell companies, Midwest Property Holdings LLC, had been identified, publicly exposed in a local business journal article titled Mystery Investor Buying Up Atlanta Properties. The article was detailed, too detailed. It mentioned specific properties Malik had acquired. It noted patterns in the purchases. It didn't name Malik directly, but it connected enough dots that anyone paying attention would start asking questions. And the Harringtons were definitely paying attention. By 10 a.m., Malik's lawyer called with worse news. Harrington Capital had filed a lawsuit against Malik personally, claiming he'd stolen proprietary information during their investment discussions. Complete fabrication, but the lawsuit was designed to freeze his assets during the legal process. A judge, who happened to golf with Richard Harrington III, granted a preliminary injunction. Malik's personal accounts were frozen, not the shell companies, not yet, but his personal money, which meant he couldn't pay his legal team, couldn't fund operations, couldn't defend himself. Then came the investor panic. 2 members of Malik's coalition, spooked by the lawsuit and the media attention, wanted out, wanted their money back, wanted to pretend they'd never been part of this. "We can't be associated with this," one of them said on a panicked call. "Harrington Capital has too much power. They'll destroy us along with you." "We're 23 days away from ending them," Malik argued. "You pull out now, you're letting them win. Better they win than we lose everything." $5 million evaporated overnight. Gone. Pulled by investors whose courage had lasted exactly until it was tested. But the worst was still coming. 3 days later, Malik woke up to find that one of his shell companies, Red Clay Investments, had been pierced. Some forensic accountant had traced the ownership structure back to a lawyer who'd done work for Malik years ago. The connection was thin, but it was enough. News broke that afternoon. Tech entrepreneur Malik Carter, behind mysterious property acquisitions. And with his name now public, everything accelerated. The Harringtons unleashed their full arsenal. Federal investigation into possible securities fraud. Anonymous tip to the IRS about unreported income. State regulators suddenly interested in how Malik's shell companies were structured. Reporters digging into every deal he'd ever made, looking for anything that could be twisted into scandal. And then the real gut punch. One of Malik's major investors got cold feet and wanted out of the Harrington Bank debt purchase. Not just their share, they wanted to sell it back to the original lenders, which would expose the entire plan and potentially give the Harringtons a chance to refinance. "You can't do this," Malik said on a call with the investor, a venture capitalist named Thomas, who'd seemed so committed just weeks ago. "We have a binding agreement." "Sue me," Thomas said coldly. "I'll tie you up in court for years, or you can let me out now and I won't actively work against you." Malik wanted to scream, wanted to reach through the phone and shake this coward who was abandoning ship right when victory was closest. But instead he said, "How much? How much what? How much did the Harringtons pay you? Because there's no way you got this scared on your own. They got to you. So how much?" Silence. Then, "Enough. And a promise that I wouldn't be included in what's coming for you. What's coming for me. They know everything, Malik. They know about the debt. They know about your plan. And they're not going to let you destroy them. Richard Harrington called me personally. He said," Thomas paused. "He said your grandfather should have taught you not to fight people who control the rules." Malik's blood went cold. That wasn't just a threat. That was a message. A reminder that the Harringtons had murdered Samuel Carter and gotten away with it. A warning that they'd do it again. "You're a coward," Malik said quietly. "And when this is over, everyone will know it." He hung up, looked at his financial situation. With Thomas pulling his $8 million, Malik was now $15 million short of what he needed to control the Harrington Bank debt. He had 20 days to find that money or the entire plan would collapse. He spent the next 3 days on the phone, calling every contact he'd ever made, pitching the opportunity, showing the evidence, begging for help. Nobody wanted in. The risk was too high. The Harringtons were fighting too hard. Malik looked like he was losing, and nobody invests in losers. By day 17, Malik was running on coffee and desperation. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. His accounts were still frozen. His legal bills were mounting. The Harringtons were closing in from every angle. He sat in his apartment, his war room now looking like a monument to failure, and thought about his grandfather, about Samuel Carter, who'd fought the Harringtons with the tools he had and lost everything, who died alone in a hospital room, beaten and broken. This is when most men quit. This is when reality breaks their spirit, and they accept that some enemies are too powerful to fight. But Malik thought about the 32 families, about the map of stolen land, about 50 years of buried truth, about descendants who deserve to know their grandparents weren't weak, weren't failures, weren't people who just gave up. They were victims of systematic, violent theft. He couldn't quit. Not now. Not ever. So Malik did something desperate. Something he'd been avoiding because it felt too risky, too exposing. He called Grace Harrington. She answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for you to call," she said. "It's bad, isn't it?" "It's falling apart," Malik admitted. "Your father knows everything. He's freezing me out, buying off my investors, destroying my reputation. I'm 15 million short, and I have 20 days to figure it out or lose everything." "He's also moving money," Grace said. "Offshore accounts, shell companies in the Caymans. He's preparing to let Harrington Bank fail and protect the family's personal wealth. If he succeeds, you might bring down the bank, but he'll walk away rich." Malik closed his eyes. Of course Richard Harrington III had an escape plan. Men like him always did. "Unless," Grace continued, "someone stops the transfers before they complete. Someone with access to his accounts and authorization codes. Malik's eyes opened. You, me. But if I do this, if I stop those transfers and freeze that money in place, he'll know immediately. I'll have maybe 6 hours before he realizes what happened and reverses everything. 6 hours to finish this. I need more than 6 hours. I need 20 days to get the rest of the money and wait for the debt to come due. Then we change the plan, Grace said. Stop waiting for the debt to come due. Force it due now. There's a clause in the loan agreement, I've seen the documents, that allows creditors to call the debt immediately if the bank's financial condition materially deteriorates. You just need to trigger that clause. How? Make the bank's problems public. File a complaint with federal regulators about their insolvency. Once it's official that the bank is failing, you can call the debt due immediately. They'll have 72 hours to pay or surrender the collateral. They'll fight it. They'll tie it up in court. Not if the evidence is overwhelming. Not if regulators are already investigating. Not if their own internal documents prove they've been lying about their financial condition for months. Malik understood. You have those documents. I have everything. My father's emails, the real balance sheets, evidence of fraud going back 3 years. I can deliver all of it to regulators tonight. By tomorrow morning, Harrington Bank will be under federal investigation. By tomorrow afternoon, you can call the debt due. Grace, if you do this, there's no going back. Your father will destroy you. My father built his empire on murder, she said quietly. I'm not his daughter anymore. I'm just someone with the power to stop him, and I'm going to use it. Okay, Malik said. Okay, send everything to the regulators. I'll prepare to call the debt. Malik, one more thing. I have access to my trust fund, $3 million, not enough to cover your shortfall, but it's something. I want to invest it in your coalition. Grace, I want my family's money to help undo my family's evil. Let me do this. Malik felt something break open in his chest. Not just gratitude, but recognition. Grace Harrington wasn't just helping him. She was burning down her own legacy because it was the right thing to do. Thank you, he said. Truly. Thanks, Samuel Carter, Grace replied. I'm just paying a debt that's 50 years overdue. That night, Grace Harrington sent 847 pages of evidence to federal banking regulators. Emails proving financial fraud. Documents showing systematic discrimination in lending. Internal memos about hiding losses. The real balance sheets that revealed Harrington Bank's insolvency. She also froze the offshore transfers her father had been arranging, locked down accounts, changed authorization codes, threw a wrench into Richard Harrington III's escape plan, and then she disappeared, left her apartment, left her phone, went somewhere her father couldn't find her until this was over. By 8 a.m. the next morning, federal investigators descended on Harrington Bank. By noon, the story was breaking on financial news networks. By 3 p.m., Harrington Bank's board was in emergency session, and at 4 p.m., Malik Carter, through his coalition of investors, formally called the $38 million debt due immediately, citing material deterioration of the bank's financial condition. Harrington Bank had 72 hours to pay, and everyone knew they couldn't. The countdown accelerated, 72 hours until Malik owned the bank, until he controlled the collateral, until he could dismantle the Harrington empire piece by piece. But Malik wasn't celebrating, because he knew the most dangerous part was just beginning. Cornered animals fight the hardest. And Richard Harrington III was about to discover that everything he'd built was slipping through his fingers. The final battle was about to begin. Hour 64 of the 72-hour countdown. 8 hours until Harrington Bank would default on its debt. 8 hours until Malik could seize control. The emergency shareholder meeting was called for 2 p.m., held in the Harrington Bank headquarters, a gleaming tower in downtown Atlanta that had been a monument to the family's power for 3 generations. Richard Harrington III had called the meeting, desperate to find a solution, to rally his allies, to somehow conjure $38 million out of thin air and protect his empire. He had no idea that the enemy he'd spent weeks trying to destroy was about to walk through the door. Malik arrived alone. No lawyers, no security, just him, carrying a leather portfolio and 50 years of buried rage. The security guard in the lobby hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is a private meeting. Shareholders only." Malik smiled coldly. "I am a shareholder, or rather, I represent the majority debt holder, which gives me the right to attend any meeting concerning the bank's financial status." The guard made a call. Confusion, consternation, then clearance. Malik was escorted to the top floor. The boardroom was everything you'd expect. Mahogany table that probably cost more than a car, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city, portraits of past Harrington patriarchs on the walls, including Richard Harrington Sr., the banker king himself, staring down with cold eyes. Around the table sat the bank's board of directors, 10 people, mostly old white men who benefited from the Harrington system for decades. They looked worried, desperate, like people watching their meal ticket disintegrate. And at the head of the table sat Richard Harrington III, still handsome, still polished, but the cracks were showing. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were bloodshot. His smile was in place, but his hands were shaking slightly. He looked up when Malik entered, and froze. For a moment, neither man moved. The room went silent. Everyone sensed that something significant was happening, even if they didn't understand what. Then Richard's face shifted. Confusion, recognition, understanding, horror. "You," he whispered. "Me," Malik replied, his voice calm and cold. He walked to the table with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the silence like a judge's gavel. Richard's board members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the power dynamic shifting beneath their feet like sand. Malik set his portfolio on that mahogany table, the same table where deals had been made to destroy Black families for generations, where Samuel Carter's fate had probably been decided over cigars and handshakes. "Gentlemen," Malik said, his voice carrying the weight of 50 years, and I use that term loosely, "I'm here representing the majority debt holder of Harrington Bank. As of this morning, your 72 hours expired. The debt is due, $38 million. Richard's lawyer stood. "Mr. Carter, we're prepared to negotiate." "There is no negotiation," Malik cut him off. "The terms are clear. Payment in full or surrender of collateral, which includes this building, and 47 other properties tied to the bank's secured debt." He opened the portfolio, pulled out documents, slid them across the table like laying down a royal flush. "But that's not why I'm really here." Richard's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tight his knuckles turned white. Malik pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, a Black man standing in front of a farmhouse, wearing overalls and a proud smile. "This is Samuel Carter, my grandfather. Does he look familiar, Richard?" Silence. "He owned 300 acres in Wilcox County, prime farmland that your grandfather wanted. But Samuel wouldn't sell, because he wasn't just a farmer. He was organizing, teaching Black families how to build generational wealth, helping them escape the economic chains your family spent decades forging." Malik's voice grew colder, sharper. "On August 14th, 1973, Samuel's house burned down. The official report said electrical fire, but 3 witnesses saw trucks leaving his property, trucks owned by men who worked for your grandfather." He slid another document across the table, the forged deed. Samuel's land was transferred to Harrington Properties while he was dying in a hospital bed. This signature, he pointed, forged. The slant is wrong. The pressure points don't match. Any handwriting expert would confirm it in 30 seconds. Richard started to speak. Malik held up a hand. "I'm not finished." He pulled out more documents. The nurse's letter, the death certificate, photographs of 18 other properties stolen from Black families. "Your grandfather didn't just steal from my family. He orchestrated a systematic campaign of economic terrorism against every successful Black landowner in Wilcox County. 32 families, over 15,000 acres, $250 million in today's value." Board members were looking at Richard now, not with support, with horror, with the dawning realization that they'd built their careers on blood money. "And you," Malik said, looking directly at Richard Harrington III, "you knew. You've always known. You inherited those records and kept them like trophies. And when I refused to let you steal my company the same way your grandfather stole my family's land, you tried to destroy me." Richard finally found his voice. "You can't prove any of this." Malik smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Actually, I can. Because your daughter gave me everything. Every document your grandfather kept. Every note about neutralizing threats. Every record of bribes and intimidation and murder disguised as accidents. Grace Harrington has more courage in her conscience than your entire bloodline combined." Richard stood abruptly. "My daughter wouldn't—" "Your daughter is ashamed of her last name," Malik interrupted, "as she should be. And right now, federal investigators are reviewing 847 pages of evidence she provided. Evidence of financial fraud, discriminatory lending practices, systematic theft. Your bank isn't just insolvent, Richard. It's criminal." The room erupted. Board members shouting questions. Richard's lawyer frantically making calls. Richard himself standing frozen, watching his empire crumble in real time. Malik let the chaos swirl for a moment. Then he spoke again, and something in his voice made everyone fall silent. "Here's what happens next. Harrington Bank is seized today. The properties used as collateral, including the mansion built on my grandfather's stolen land, will be sold to satisfy the debt. Your personal accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Your offshore transfers were blocked before they completed." He paused, let it sink in. "Everything your family built on Black blood and stolen land, it's over. Today." Richard collapsed back into his chair. For the first time in his life, he looked small, powerless, afraid. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did." Malik gathered his documents, turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing. Every dollar recovered from the seizure, it's going into a restitution fund for the descendants of the families your grandfather destroyed. We found them all, every single one, and they're getting back what was stolen." He looked at Richard Harrington III one last time. "Your grandfather thought he could erase Samuel Carter, bury him, make sure he was forgotten. But blood doesn't stay buried forever. And debts? Debts always come due." Malik walked out, left Richard Harrington III sitting in a boardroom that was no longer his, surrounded by a board that could no longer protect him, facing consequences that were 50 years overdue. The banker king's grandson was bankrupt, and the farmer's grandson owned everything. 60 days later, the mansion looked different in the morning light. Still white columns, still manicured lawns, but now it belonged to someone else. Malik stood on the porch of the house built on his grandfather's land, the house the Harringtons had lived in for 50 years, sleeping soundly on stolen ground. He'd bought it for pennies on the dollar during the bank seizure auction. No one else bid against him. Everyone knew this wasn't about real estate. This was about restoration. Malik walked through the empty rooms, saw the spaces where the Harringtons had celebrated their wealth, had raised their children, had lived in comfort built on his family's suffering. He went to the back of the property, to the exact spot where Samuel's farmhouse once stood, where his grandmother died in flames, where his grandfather's dreams burned to ash. Malik knelt, touched the soil, and whispered, "We're home, grandfather." He stayed there for a long time, letting 50 years of grief wash through him. Letting it go, when he stood, he pulled out a document from his jacket, something he discovered in the final sweep of Samuel's records. A deed, hidden, protected, dated 1889. Proof that Samuel's grandfather had bought this land free and clear. Proof that the Carter family had legal ownership going back over a century. Proof that every transfer to the Harringtons was fraud. Malik didn't need it anymore. The legal battles were won. The Harringtons were finished. Richard III was facing federal charges. The bank was dismantled. The stolen properties were being returned. But he kept the deed anyway, framed it, hung it in what used to be the Harrington family's study. A reminder, a testament, a gravestone for those who thought they could erase history. The news coverage was relentless. National headlines, federal investigations, a story too perfect, too poetic to ignore. Tech entrepreneur exposes 50-year land theft scheme. Harrington banking empire built on stolen black land. Justice delayed. Family reclaims legacy after 5 decades. Richard Harrington III was arrested. Multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. His lawyers were good, but the evidence was overwhelming. Grace had given Malik everything. The trial lasted 6 months. Every day, descendants of the 32 stolen families filled the courtroom, bearing witness, reclaiming their stories, refusing to let history bury their grandparents' truth. Richard was sentenced to 15 years. His assets were seized. His name became synonymous with everything ugly about American racism. The polished kind, the legal kind, the kind that wore suits and smiled while it destroyed you. But Malik? Malik was busy building. He converted the Harrington Mansion into the Samuel Carter Center for Economic Justice, a training facility, a resource hub, a place where Black entrepreneurs could learn about generational wealth, property law, financial literacy. Everything Samuel had tried to teach in secret, Malik taught in the open. He established the Stolen Land Restitution Fund. Every penny recovered from the Harrington seizure went to descendants. Some received cash payments. Others received property. All received something more important: acknowledgement, truth, the knowledge that their families weren't failures. They were victims of systematic, violent theft. And the town, the small southern town where Samuel Carter was murdered, it changed, slowly, painfully. But it changed. A memorial was erected in the town square, 32 names carved in stone. The families who lost everything, who were erased by greed disguised as progress. Samuel Carter's name was first, not because he was more important, but because his grandson made sure he'd never be forgotten again. 1 year later, Malik stood in front of a crowd. Young Black entrepreneurs, students, community leaders, people who looked like him, people who carried the same wounds he'd carried. "My grandfather believed that land ownership was freedom," Malik said. "Not just physical freedom, economic freedom. The freedom to build something that couldn't be taken away by a badge or a ballot box or a burning cross." He paused. Let the words breathe. The Harringtons tried to prove him wrong. They stole his land, murdered him, erased him from history. And for 50 years, it looked like they won. His voice grew stronger. But they didn't understand something fundamental. You can burn houses. You can forge deeds. You can silence witnesses. But you cannot kill an idea. You cannot erase the truth forever. And you cannot stop the blood of the oppressed from crying out for justice. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. My grandfather planted seeds in the minds of the families he taught, in the communities he organized, in the son who survived and taught me that our worth wasn't determined by what they stole from us, but by what we built despite them. Malik held up the framed deed, Samuel's deed, proof of ownership, proof of legacy. This isn't just paper. This is resistance. This is refusal. This is 32 families saying, we were here, we mattered. We built something beautiful, and no amount of theft or violence or lies can erase that. He looked out at the faces in the crowd, saw hope, saw determination, saw the future. The Harringtons thought they were building an empire, but empires built on stolen ground always crumble. Always. It just takes time, and someone willing to dig up the truth. Grace Harrington never returned to her family name. She started over. New city, new identity, new life built on her own terms, not her family's blood money. She sent Malik one final message, encrypted and anonymous. Thank you for letting me help bury them. Some legacies deserve to die. Richard Harrington III died in prison. Heart attack. Some said it was karma. Others said it was mercy. Malik didn't care either way. The Harrington name disappeared from buildings, from banks, from the town's landscape, erased the way they'd erased so many others. But the Carter name was everywhere. Samuel Carter Center for Economic Justice, the Carter Scholarship Fund, Carter Community Land Trust, Carter Legacy Library. Names carved in stone, built in brick, written in scholarship offers and property deeds, and the futures of families who finally had a chance. Malik never married, never had children, but he didn't need to. His legacy wasn't biological, it was ideological. Every Black family that owned land because of his work, every entrepreneur who understood their rights because of his training, every descendant who finally knew their grandfather's true story, that was his legacy. And 50 years from now, when people walk through the Samuel Carter Center, when they see the memorial in the town square, when they read about the fall of the Harrington Empire, they'll know this truth. Some debts take generations to pay, but they always come due, always. And justice doesn't expire. It just waits, gathering interest, getting stronger, until the day someone brave enough, angry enough, and determined enough decides to collect. Malik sits on the porch of the mansion that used to be stolen. The sun is setting over land that finally belongs to the right family. He's reading letters from descendants, thanking him, sharing their grandparents' stories that were almost lost, almost erased, almost forgotten. He opens one more letter. It's from a 10-year-old girl whose great-grandfather lost his farm to the Harringtons in 1974. She's written, "Thank you for remembering us. My teacher says history is written by winners. But you proved that wrong. We didn't win back then, but we're winning now because of you." Malik folds the letter carefully, tucks it in his jacket pocket. He looks out at the land. The same land Samuel Carter farmed, the same soil his grandmother's blood soaked into, the same ground where dreams died and were buried. But dreams don't stay buried forever. He whispers to the wind, to the land, to the memory of a man he never got to meet. "We did it, grandfather. We brought them down. We told your story. We made sure you mattered." The wind rustles through the trees, and if you believed in such things, if you listened carefully, you might hear a response. "I always knew you would, son. I always knew." Malik stands, walks inside, gets back to work, because the fight isn't over. It never is. But today, justice won. Today, the stolen came home. Today, 32 families got their names back. And Malik Carter, grandson of Samuel Carter, heir to a legacy that couldn't be burned or buried or erased, made sure that no one would ever forget. This is Black Stories Journal, where we dig up the truths that power tried to bury, where we honor the names they tried to erase, where we prove that justice might be slow, but it's inevitable. Subscribe, share, remember, because history tried to forget Samuel Carter, but his grandson made damn sure that would never happen. And somewhere, on stolen land that finally came home, a farmer's ghost rests easy, knowing his legacy didn't die with him. It just waited for the right descendant to collect the debt, with 50 years of interest.